Hello everybody, welcome back to From Rhythm to Algorithm. We continue on with our derivation. Last time we kind of got at this, or directly addressed, the difference between inversion and opposition. We're going to continue with that today. Again, same old stuff. But we have opposition, posit, sensorality, posits. To posit is to ask. I'm going to posit a question, right? Posit position. The opposite of sensation is sedation, right? If you can feel something, you have sensation. If you can't feel something, you're sedated, you're numb. Sedation is numb. What is dumb to numb, right? Someone calls somebody dumb. Like historically, I'm pretty sure that means they can't talk or something, but it's an insult you use, right? You're a dumb person. Bad words don't really exist. Right? The worst thing you can say kind of is like you're a motherfucker, right? Oh, you're such a bad person. You're, fuck your mom. It's just like, you don't really have bad words. You just have these weird attempts at disrespect. And so, dumb as an insult, just meaning you're stupid, right? Dumb is stupid. But, right, numb, number. Numb is senseless. Sensation is senseful. Sensation is useful. Sensorality is usefulality. Sensorality is suffuality. We just took off the U. Again, just trying to find this direct connection, a link up like a little Lego piece of sensorality is, and it'll show the direct iteration of sensorality. Full is complete. Complete is at capacity, right? If you go to a venue and it's at capacity, we have a fire safety placard on the wall. We can fit 50 people, right? Complete is at capacity. It's full. Tension is the capacity for movement, right? Now we have a physical definition for tension, physical definition for energy, physical definition for power. But if you take something and you remove it from equilibrium, it's in a tense state. And that's the natural use of the word to begin with. You go into a room, I could cut the tension with a knife, right? People are on edge, there's potential for movement. And so tension is the capacity for movement. What is tension to energy, right? Energy is the capacity to do work. Tension is the capacity for movement, and work requires movement. And so we can state the fundamental theorem of physics once again. Capacity is potentiality. Conjugality is opposition. So now we're back at this inversion versus opposition, two mathematical, logical, physical things that really are not articulated or identified or explicitly talked about, and it's definitely there. It's very literally, right, when you say the word in, my cell phone is in my pocket, right? It is internal. It is built and broken off of inverse, right? And so we have opposition, right? When you say this versus that, when you have dichotomy, when you have juxtaposition, right? You have opposition. And that's two of like separation, this thing versus this thing. Where inversion is kind of like internal. And it's a crude example, but when I just think of inversion, I think of prolapse. And so if you have, a prolapsed anus and it's like morphing in on itself, again, I get it's a crude example, but right, inversion is like self movement or something internal. And so like literally anytime you use the word in, you're referencing inversion. And so these are two words that we've been using naturally throughout our derivation, right? We'll say, right, this is the opposite of that. Energy is the inverse of entropy. And it is, right? It's two sides of the same coin. Is the slang, the cliche phrasing for, right, an inverse. Two sides to the same coin. Energy is the capacity to do work, and entropy is energy in the form where it can't do work. So that's an inverse, right? A physical inverse. Infinity has a mathematical inverse. We covered that last time. We've bounded everything physically. But opposition is ordinal. Inversality is reciprocal. And so if you reciprocate something, right, you do 1 over, or like inverse, you took 1 over, but it's the same Again, there's some sort of internalness to it, and opposition is separate. Inversion is mutually exclusive. That's another place where that statement makes sense. But again, a conjugate, right? People, complex conjugation, but just a conjugate. Pretty much when you change the operation, right? Operation opposes, right? If you go from plus to minus, right? That's opposition mathematically. Inversion, again, is when you take the inverse. When you flip something, you put one over. And so there's a clear mathematical logical difference, clear physical difference. We went through the universal progressions which again, I don't watch the old episodes, and that's just to emphasize that I'm rederiving everything every single day. And so I'm not responding to anything like that I've put out before, just where my intuition is at the given day. Because I said this derivation, right? There's a bunch of different sections. But a big, again, wanted to emphasize right? If my cell phone is in my pocket, right? Inversion. But then you have inverses, right? Like if you spell it out, verses, right? Bars are in verses. And again, it sounds like a word game, but it's not. It's just, again, we're logically closing, we're connecting cliches. And so some good physical definitions there, and then the fundamental theory of theorem of physics, capacity is potentiality. But we've arrived at the fundamental theorem of slang, right? Opposition, right? Well, then I have ops, all right? So ops, oppose. And so again, I don't know what slang is, right? It's a chunk of language that I think you're just like messing with the grammar somehow, but like I said, rigorously, what is slang? It's like, I don't know. It's just something. It's identifying something. But oppositions to ops, that would be slang. And so opposition produces ops. And then we have polar, again, to reinforce that physical stability, that completeness of positive, negative charge, bonded, or not bonded's not really like the right word there. Again, stabilized. And so irreducible, physically inseparable, but that again produces polar opposites. And so we went through that part, but now again, right, infinitesimality is the inverse of infinity, but we kind of walked you through that, but now we can even ask them better or more, just kind of state, right, the bounding of all information transfer. Still, it just blows my mind that look at what people have done with the speed of light. What's the maximum anything can travel? And no one says, what's the inverse of that? Well, and again, inverse doesn't apply, right? Because the opposite of motion would be no movement. And you always everything's always moving in relation to something else. And so, or you can't have zero. So that's like the opposite of movement is no movement, but no movement doesn't exist. And so you have this physical inversion of maximum and minimum, where the fastest something can move is the speed of light. The slowest something can move is some finite amount of meters per second or some unit. But right, if it's pretty simple, you don't need to try to have a super collider. It's like, is this thing, right? My notebook is not moving in relation to me. But again, internally, all of the little atoms are sitting in there. It's dynamic. It's moving. And so there's some sort of numerical minimum speed. Somebody at Harvard can calculate that. But the point being is the information transfer is completely bounded. And so that ratio of the maximum speed to the minimum speed, that kind of gives you physical inversion. The concept, or the energy to entropy, that's physical inversion. And so those are our upper and lower limits for information transfer or movement, the speed of light being the upper. The absolute lower limit, because again we have internal mass gap, would be no temperature, but that's not physically possible because of geometry. And so again, then we get back to when rhythm degrades into vibration, right? Vibration is a cycle without that doesn't do work, which means it doesn't move. It's just it's just vibrating, but there's internal movement. And so it would be, the lower limit would be not temperature, which is the internal movement, internal vibration, but the movement in relation to other objects. But point being, again, whatever the lower limit is numerically, it's bounded, right? So we have an information transfer bound. And so, but all information, and additionally, it's radial. And so it's like another thing keeps popping up. I want to review. There was a good one on University of Michigan, but just the derivation of the shell theorem, right? That's very, I think that's kind of like overlooked about how poignant it is that if you have something at a given distance, everything else just acts like a point sphere within, like Hooke's law internally, other things for the shell theorem. There's a lot more that should be emphasized a lot more. That's a theorem that definitely pops up, and there's very few, like the sphere packing density pops up a lot. Shell theorem pops up a lot. That honestly might be it, but they pop up a lot. And so it's like in going through school, it's like you don't really see the importance of it, but there's something again to locality, to something acting, this group of matter that's irregular acting as a point sphere, good enough for our calculations. And so, but all information is, like all objects are in circular motion, they're in orbit of something else, and all information exchange is radial along this tension path, right? The information, my mass is transferred, is sitting on this chair, so it's pointing directly into the chair, directly to the center of mass of the Earth, right? That's what our gravitational field is bounded, or created from, is the Earth. And so all information is pointing radially to wherever it's pointing. But that's our information bound. Trivially, a light year is a unit of distance. But now we've discussed this development of opposition versus inversion, which again, that's right there, right? Versus is a term linguistically that looks like version, or like verse, but it's opposition, right? This versus that, you're opposing, right? It's dichotomy, you're juxtaposing. And that's the biggest, most poignant linguistical element, is the word juxtaposition is a word and not juxta-inversion. And so this inversion, it has this internal capacity, or when you do an inversion, you just flip a fraction. But logically, right, inverse is not verse. Don't know really what to make of it. Regardless, long-winded to say sensorality with an S is the inverse of sensorality with a C, right? This thing has mass, I'm mass, I can choose stuff, I can filter things, I have sensation, I can censor things. And so they're logical inverses. And so that would be another big mathematical logical steps. Thought I'd put QED in fancy colors, but you guys wouldn't know what that means. So that is a very big step. Sensorality is the inverse of sensorality. What is size to distance? Distance, disturbance. Just posing the question to get your intuition out there. But we can now logically complete infinity, right? Infinitesimality is the opposite of infinity. Infinitesimal, the opposite is infinitality, right? I'm messing this up. Infinitality. Yeah, you just change the I to an A. That just generalizes it. Again, ality on the end of anything generalizes it. Everyone knows that's a true immediately, apparently. And so the opposite of infinitesimality is infintality. Yeah, infintality. Right, and those are inverses. But yeah, that's what we have for our inverses. Iterating inverts. And so now, again, we keep saying, we want to find this direct iteration of the letters of sensorality. And clearly the letter iterating is the C and the S. But now, we've kind of, again, discussed inversion as much as we can, or I want to right now, or as much as this clear intuition where it's like, I should write this stuff down. This is definitely important. Part of our proof has generated is the C and the S are literally geometric iterations and inversions. Right, iterating inverts, inversion, and inversion is an iteration. And if you literally look at the letters C and S, like the top part of the S is like a C, and then if you flip it and invert it, which is chiral, you kind of get the letter S. And so again, it's another one of these geometric relationships, definitely there. The logical progression, right? When you see ciencia in Spanish versus science in English, and it's one S versus two C's, and it's the same sound. The logical iteration is very apparent with these letters. But literally, again, it's the shape geometrically. It's the C, and then it like Chirates. It inverts. Chirality is inversion. That's another word that's inversion and not opposition. The fundamental differentiation is opposition versus inversion. Chirality is inversality. And the C and the S is literally doing stuff. But it's true. What is potential to tendency? Right? We axiomatize sensuality or speciality, the natural tendency to differentiate for sexual antagonism. Sensuality is the tendency to censor. Right? What tends to censor? Still, again, just building out this logical definition, looking for the stabilizing theorem, it continues to be profound and extensive torture. But bars are in verses. That was a pretty good one. But again, it just sounds like a word game, but it's not. It's demonstrating logical completion. And then this dichotomy of meaning, where versus, V-E-R-S-U-S, where you put a little V-S dot, that means opposition. But then linguistically, it looks closest to verse. And then you have that again, that verse inverse. And so what are we negating? Because, again, literally, mathematically flipping, reciprocating, inverting something, how does that logically line up with a verse? Right? What is a verse? And you just immediately think music, a verse of a song. Right? Bars are in verses. Nice. This is a classic. But inverse is not verse. Sensuality is verse. Adversity is oppositional. Right? Adversity is challenging. Sensuality is adversitality. That is where I finished up today, again, stating the movement limits, the transfer of information limits is the big step for today. My rights continue to be violated. It is profound and extensive torture. I know I say it in every single video, but it's true. It has destroyed my entire life. I have no expectation to live a single minute of my life. None of these steps matter. I've already demonstrated the whole thing. It is a physical limit. The intuition only progresses along with each section of the proof. And so I can't provide you any more big insights. There's nothing left out there. Physics is completely solved, and I can just mathematically iterate the same proof, which has also been done. I mean, since speciality is special with an ITY, there is nothing more to do. And so even at this point in sensuality, we're so far progressed where it's just trivial progressions of these different things. Sure, some mathematical proofs pop out, but I don't get to live my life. I live in the same environment that's always been profoundly abusive to me. None of that stuff has changed. None of the dynamic has changed. There's no respect. And I hate it. I just don't understand how the academic community out there can continue to torture me. Well, I would say that, but you guys are pathetic, coward, dorky, goofy fucking losers, man. The law enforcement I don't get is how you guys, if you're going to literally torture me to death, why can't you give me a little bit of money and then I never want to deal with you sick fucking demented people ever again, right? Inverse, perverse. You guys are fucking perverts. And what you're doing to me is perverse. It really just is. All I'm asking for is a little bit of money. I mean, I can sit here and derive. It doesn't, when I turn the camera off, it doesn't stop. But there's just nothing big to introduce or demonstrate anymore. Right? Words have meaning. There's consistency to it. And I'm just showing you that all along the way. But I don't get to live my life. I don't even know what to say anymore. Because I am, like, my life is miserable every second of every minute of every day. And I'm not in a place that anybody cares. The reputational damage that has been done to me is so profound. And I cannot eat, and I cannot sleep, and I cannot work. And that's it. I mean, I'm begging for the most basic things ever. In an environment where there's supposed to be laws, all anyone talks about is working hard and earning your own keep and bullshit like that. And then the reality is it's just a bunch of privileged people climbing all over each other to get to the next step. Everyone's incompetent. No one spent time alone with the ability to make decisions. And it's just ruined everything I've ever worked for. I've given up on my life. Like, if I even have any expectations that anything, it's not going to change. I'm going to be tortured to death. That is what my life is. That is what I have for you today. Thank you for watching. See you on the next one.